Welcome to Unprompted, where we go behind the scenes with the people shaping the future of conversational AI. I'm Rachel Whitehorn, and in this episode, I'm joined by Hillary Black, a conversation designer, marketer, content creator, and community builder who's been leading the conversation design and brand efforts at Mav, an AI powered SMS assistant for lead generation. Amazing. Hillary, you're also the founder of Conversation Designer Jobs and the Conversation Designers Internet Club. And you've served on the UX Industrial Advisory Board at the Milwaukee School of Engineering. So many wonderful things already. Like, what an intro. So happy to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be chatting with you, meeting you virtually today. And yeah, I definitely have quite the mouthful as far as all of the things that I am doing on a day-to-day basis.
We love to see it. All of us, all of the fans of you are so happy to see it. Um, and so for today's conversation, we're going to explore Hillary's multi-hyphenate role at Mav, how her work has evolved from scripting dialogues to shaping product conversations and prompt systems, and what she's learned from reviewing hundreds of portfolios and mentoring the next generation of conversation designers. So, whether you're just getting started or you're leading a team, this is a thoughtful, practical look at what it really means to build and scale in this space. All right. So, Hillary, I do want to start kind of broad by asking you what's something you feel is true about conversational AI that very few people understand?
I don't know if very few people understand it, but I do still think that we have not even scratched the surface of the true potential of conversational AI. I do feel, especially in kind of how we're moving as an industry towards prompts and everything like that, it almost feels like we're starting over. And
Yeah,
it almost feels like we have the benefit now that all the news and all the popularity of AI is kind of educating our potential customers or educating our new talent for us. But I do really feel like companies, brands, people don't necessarily understand what conversational AI means, what conversation design means. And so we are almost starting in a new place when, we started and in the beginning of my career was with chatbots and explaining that to people all the time. And I feel like we are kind of in that. It's just that the level of understanding that people have about AI has grown so much. So it's very interesting to compare the two.
yeah, I've noticed that it's like we've unlocked a new level in that now we have context in a way that was so hard to achieve traditionally. So we're, as I've said, I think before, delivering customers' expectations for the first time in some ways. So that opens up a world of possibilities for us. But people have never really understood conversation design, and so still a challenge
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
I think like expectations for users and customers is so incredibly high because they are now familiar with using AI tools in pretty much every single app and every single website that they interact with.
100%. Now, moving to Mav, you've been with Mav for 7 years. Can you walk us through how your roles evolved alongside your project?
Yeah. So I started, my career in conversation design at Mav. I definitely know a lot more than I knew back then. When I first started with the company, we were more of a consultancy versus now we're more of a product company. So I really was brought in to help with marketing the company and the consultancy at the time. And I was kind of managing their social media and when customers were coming to us saying, "Hey, we heard about these chatbots, like, can you make them for us?" And the company was making, web apps, websites, and mobile apps for people. We were like, "Yeah, that kind of fits within." And I was like, "Hey, I know how to like write post for Facebook, I could probably figure out how to write it for Facebook Messenger. And so that was sort of like where I started in my like knowledge of conversation design. So I definitely have learned a lot over the years, and I think that, like, my understanding of the role and what all went into it, like, in the beginning, it was a lot more strategy, and it was a lot more of us educating our customers and a lot more of, trial and error and trying to figure out where the technology was going and what platforms we were going to be using, and now it has definitely evolved to where we're honing in on, like, what's our area of expertise? What's our use cases that we believe in the most, and kind of
Yeah.
what is our industries that we're focusing on. So we've gotten way more specific about the way that we build our product, the intentions behind it. And so that has kind of been where my focus has gone towards. But I always have been in this kind of like two-part role of marketing, social media, brand, and then also conversation design. And so to me, those things, like, all fit together. I think that, especially if it's, like, an AI product or an agent, like, it is a brand in its own way, and that's kind of how I've always approached conversation design and, like, my frame of thinking, so it's been a
Yeah.
very natural progression, I guess.
Yeah, and, like, that's where multi-hyphenate comes into it, right? Like, you keep taking on more and more, which is not unlike conversation designers in general, in my experience, and even for myself. Like, you think they're a person who sits alone and does flowcharts and, just designs, but it really there's analysis, there's stakeholder management. You really expand into, like, looking at the product as a whole and helping in any way that you can. And I think that's true
Yeah,
for a lot of
it's
people.
Yeah, it's more than just design, and it definitely, as much as I don't have the technical
Mhm.
background or technical expertise as like an engineer does or someone on the product team, understanding how users are interacting with the product and understanding kind of what could be the possibilities is something that I definitely have like become more close to. And I think a lot of conversation designers we see shift towards product roles, so
Yeah.
that it makes sense because it all is in one, right?
100%. And with MAV, I think we've heard it called like a call center in a box. So, what does that mean in practice? And what does the assistant actually do for clients?
Yeah. Um, so someone on our team just yesterday was saying that basically Mav makes the phone ring. And so we work, as you said, like in lead generation. And so the way that sort of a call center typically works is a user puts their phone number into a form on a website. Their phone starts blowing up with phone calls of people. Hey, do you want to get qualified for an insurance policy? Hey, we're this company. Can we help you? And then you're kind of passed along the chain. And no one wants that.
Yeah.
No, if any person out there, whether you've like qualified for a mortgage, an insurance policy, sign up for health insurance, anything like that, you are familiar with this kind of like way that things work where you're just like getting blown up with calls. And so what MAV does is we can kind of replace that aspect. So instead of someone getting a phone call right away to get qualified or to get a quote or to, express interest in this service, they are going to do that through text messaging with, Mav, the assistant. And so it would be on behalf of that company. We are taking over that and saying, what type of car do you have? What state do you live in? And then we will be passing that off and creating a live phone call transfer to the, like, closer who's going to actually close the deal, and so that would be what a traditional call center would be doing. They would be picking up the phone, they would be following up with people, they would be trying to get them on the phone, the back and forth, like cat and mouse game, and all of that can be handled by Mav, and we can obviously pass all that information to their CRM, we can integrate with the various systems that they're using to kind of fit within their workflow, and just sit and kind of replace that, whether it is the first point of contact, whether they already tried to get a hold of them on the phone and then we're kind of taking over from there, whether we are working leads that are not economically viable to be worked by humans because they're a shared lead, they've been contacted numerous times, they're a bit cold. It's all of those types of use cases. And Mav kind of just takes care of all of that back and forth, has that positive interaction with the customer to see if they are ready to take the next step. And then they get on the phone with a rep to complete that action.
It makes total sense because I'm one of those people that has the focus setting on my phone at all times. Like, I reject pretty much all calls. If it's an unknown number, I'm like, no, thank you. Pretend I don't exist. But I'm so much more likely to at least review a text. And maybe it's a generational thing that you've seen. But to me, it makes total sense that this is where lead generation should be going. Because, like you said, the cat and mouse thing is exhausting. Um,
Yeah, and it's expensive. It's expensive
yeah,
for, the companies, and it's not we want to put the users and, like, their customers, in control of the conversation. So, yeah, you're getting a phone call, you're stepping into a meeting, you're watching a movie, you're with your family. You don't want to have that right then, but you are
yeah,
still shopping. And so to have the users be able to have that conversation at their convenience is definitely the way that things should be done, in my opinion.
1,000,000%. And so speaking of all of the different ways that Mav is helping with lead generation, do you have a recent product feature that you've been excited to work on of late? Maybe something like we've heard Party Lines or Mav Copilot?
Yeah, so party lines is something that I am working on right now. I'm working on both of these things, but definitely sort of what I had mentioned in describing the product that once a user says they're interested and they're ready to talk, we're initiating that phone call between their human rep and the lead. And so that's what we call a party line. So it's like they're,
Gotcha.
both getting on the phone, and so working on that transition has been something that we're kind of experimenting with of like, what is the best way to get someone on the phone? Especially as you described, if you have do not disturb turned on, the call might go straight to voicemail. So then how do we recover that? How do we then text them and say, hey, we just tried calling you, call us at this number? Or do we put the rep on the phone first or the user on the phone first? Or do we put them both at the same time? Do we have them confirm with like a ketone once they get on the phone? Press one to be connected. There's so many different options and
Hmm.
challenges. And so to see through all of those different design choices, what is going to get the best result, which in the end is connecting those two people. Like that's what our goal is, to connect them and have it be um, you know, a call that is over a certain length of time that kind of indicates, yes, they did take the next step, as opposed to the rep picks up the phone, no one's there. Like that's kind of what we're trying to fix.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a lot of unique challenges around that. And it is something that can be solved with conversation design, whether it's through that messaging or it's through what's happening on the phone, or something that can be solved with product decisions. So that to me is just like very exciting to do these small tests, do these small changes, and see what works best.
It's such a good example of, like, the list of options that you could decide on. It's what makes the designer role so necessary because when you see good design, everybody knows, like, if you don't notice it, then the designer's done a good job, right? But
Hmm.
I have always thought of design as, like, it's decision making, and it's thinking about something before you do it. And I love how you laid out that, like, something that is so simple isn't so simple. There's so many things that it could be that eliminating the bad versions of it is a real job. And designers have to
Yeah.
do that very
Yeah.
well.
And it's something that when I'm kind of saying it, someone, especially if they are early on in conversation design, they might not be as excited about it, or they might just like not really notice it. And they might not be looking at the overall experience saying, like, hey, why do we see drop here? Like, hey, why is this happening? What are the different ways? Because it isn't just a dialogue thing. And even if it is, there's so many different options, and it's not just about does it work or does it not work. And I think that that's kind of the good parts of conversation design to me is just like, yes, it works, and yes, it does what it is supposed to do, but like, is there more here? Like, what can we do to kind of make all these small improvements over time?
Yeah, like you can have a bland cake, and someone may buy it, or you could have a very good one, like a chantilly cake, and all of the fixings with it, and it's like just because
They're both
it's
still
not a
cakes.
right, it's not a binary choice or like a pass or fail when it comes to design. There are better versions. But it can differ in the way that maybe engineers think about it. So that leads me into my next question, which is, you've had to collaborate more with engineering and product as you've taken on more. So what's changed in how your teams work together?
Um, so I work in a startup environment, and so like the number one thing that has changed is we've added more people. And so we recently have hired a head of engineering. We hired a head of product at in the fall of this past year. And so just having these outside people to kind of like add on to the perspectives has been so incredibly helpful. Obviously, they're bringing types of expertise that are maybe coming from different places, or they just know more about these other types of technology that we don't necessarily know about. But I think in general, it's just similar to like why you would do testing, user testing, or like random testing from outside parties, is you can just get this thing that is in front of you that you didn't really think about or know about. And I definitely feel like I am very fortunate that our entire company is aware of conversation design and like the importance of conversation design. And we've
Yeah.
always been a very like design focused and design forward organization as opposed to just like let's throw tech on everything, let's have engineers write. Like, there obviously is some of that always, like, if it just is necessary to do like a proof of concept or something, but there's definitely like an overall understanding. And so they will come to me for those types of, decisions or just like be very open about let's get those different perspectives. So that type of collaboration has been my favorite thing just about the way that our team has evolved over the years, and just how we have grown. So I think that that's definitely helpful. And then for me too, especially once we're getting into prompting, like that's something that I don't know as much about. And so I
Mm.
can go to, our head of engineering who does know about it and who is actually building it and say, how can we create a shared language between ourselves that is going to set us up for success? But then to him, we're working on things and saying, like, yes, this is functional and this is great. And then I'm looking at it with a fine tooth comb of saying, like, hey, I know we're responding correctly when this person is doing this, but can we add in this one detail and then that will, make the person feel better? And I think
Right.
that just when you're dealing with users, especially in like a lead generation type of situation or like insurance, healthcare, all of those more like sensitive industries,
Mhm.
the way that you communicate with the users and kind of the way you make them feel about their parts of personal information or like their financial background or their health background, it is very important. And I don't necessarily think that someone who's not a designer would think about that, and then once you explain it to them, they're like, "Oh, absolutely, that makes so much sense, like, we should do
Mhm.
that." So it's been a fun, period of time right now as we're kind of, like, going through all of that.
Yeah, a couple of things there because what it sounds like you're describing and what I think is true is that designers think from an empathetic state of mind pretty much all the time.
Mhm.
And it's our job to care in that way. Whereas sometimes, I feel a lot of empathy for my coworkers who, like, what they have to care about is the deadline. What they have to care about is QA in the more
Mhm.
traditional sense. And so it's nice that there is supposed to be this one person who lives in that like space where you're putting yourself in the user's shoes and can always bring that up and point out where we're failing in that. So,
Yeah, like, we're protecting the user, like, at all costs. Like, I'm always thinking about that, and yeah, like, sales wants to think about how are we keeping the best interest of our customer? How are we making sure our customers are happy? Engineering is thinking, like, we need this to work, and, like, that is
right.
obviously an incredibly important thing is, like,
Yes,
yeah, it needs
please
to
make it
work.
work.
Like, that to me is, like, an assumed thing. I'm like, "Okay, you're gonna make it, like, work amazingly, lower all of the errors. You're going to make sure that we're responding to people in appropriate time period, like all of these things that should happen. And then I'm going to make sure that we are like connecting all of the dots."
Yeah, and couldn't agree more about it. And it does sound like you are in this really nice position where people at least understand conversation design and respect it on the team, but you are technically the only conversation designer at Mav, correct?
Correct. Yes. And I have always been the only one. But yeah, that's kind of just the nature of, I think, being in a startup too.
So, besides what you've mentioned so far, are there any design specific things like design governance or conversation quality that you've been handling that, is still very much the conversation designer domain? That it's the things that only you do?
I do think that we collaborate a lot with like, I collaborate a lot with product on doing that, and it's kind of like if we have ideas, or I'll say, like, I want to audit all of the experiences that we currently have on our platform, I will work with them to say, like, how can I do this in a way that is going to be helpful to you? Or if we want to be setting up some sort of QA, some sorts of testing, like, it is a very collaborative effort to say, like, here are the things that I think we should be looking at, but you as like the product expert, how can we make that a reality? And how can I sort of talk in a way that's going to be understandable to you?
I was about to say, maybe there's a startup out there that's like, we're the content management system for prompting. We've solved all your issues. And it's like, where are you? Come find us. Like, tell us about it. Yeah.
Exactly, and I think there are a few that are kind of popping up, but everything has different purposes, and it's similar to in, our early days of conversation design when there were many different, design tools and there were many different, hosting tools that were out there, like, everyone kind of used something different and everything had the ability to do different things, export in different ways, like test in different ways. And so it's kind of just like a personal choice, I think, what people feel works best for their brain. And so that's definitely something I am hoping to just create myself.
I mean, the important thing is that you do it, that you have
Yeah.
versioning. So however you get there
Yeah.
for now is good.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's a difficult thing to do, but if you had to choose what the trickiest part of moving from a more dialogue first workflow to something more modular and prompt based would be, like what do you think is the really hard part?
It's all hard. It's all hard. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I think a lot of what we talked about already, is hard of just like having the versioning and like knowing how you're going to test and track when things are slightly different and like variable if it's content that's being generated by AI. Obviously, to me as like especially coming from like a person who cares a lot about like brand reputation and cares a lot about like communications, like being able to kind of like control fully the way that an experience is communicating with people, the way
Hmm.
it's talking, the way it's recovering, like those are all things that I think about a lot. And obviously those are things that you can influence. It's just making sure that you do that. But yeah, I think additionally kind of just deciding like at what point do you want to be, letting things go and letting things be more open-ended, which is so much better of an experience, especially with SMS, like the way people text, it's not ABCD, they want to write back, I have a 700 credit score. Like those are two very different ways to communicate. So just like thinking about what things do we still want to be scripted? What things do we want to be open? How are we going to make all of those fit together? There's just a lot of like questions floating out there in the world. But it's all just focusing on, like, taking a step back and just, like, breathe and, like, let's make incremental improvements and let's really think through.
Right, it doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to exist at least. Um, you mentioned, maybe creating some projects if you don't have a lot of experience. Do you think, like, real work, quote, unquote, versus, a practice project you did yourself, is one more valuable than the other? Should people feel hung up about that? Um, is it okay to have a bunch of, like, projects that you just created yourself?
I think it's okay. I do think people get hung up on not having legitimate or real work projects. But like one thing to definitely keep in mind is that a lot of people have work projects and they're unable to talk about them because like they signed
Yes.
NDAs. Yeah. So that's like a
Ugh.
huge, huge thing now. So for those people and, for people who are just starting out, like they're in the same situation. Like you can present around your NDA of, you can kind of like recreate some things, not mention the name. You can still talk about your work process, talk about what portions you were involved in, and like have that to kind of be a workaround. But that's why kind of supplementing with these projects that you have created.
Those are such good points. I think for myself and my portfolio, I'm likely to take some of that. Like, I was thinking of different ideas to do. So, really good do's for portfolios. Besides not having one at all, what are some of the biggest don'ts that you've seen, either with portfolios or resumes? Like, what are some missteps you've noticed?
Yeah, so obviously not having one is definitely a don't. I think like as far as resumes are concerned, I know that there's definitely some differences in opinions as far as like creating the more like visual, like aesthetic type of resume that has like your photo on it and is very designed versus the types of resumes that are going to be easily like scanned by AI readers. I think there are places for both. I think that if you want to have like a pretty resume, have that be the thing that you're emailing to people, have that be the thing that you are bringing to a job interview or sending to people before, and then have the one that is kind of like the plain proper one that you're using to apply for jobs. So that's definitely like I wouldn't necessarily say it's a don't because it is something that still is valuable, but I do think that that is, a challenge that I see, and it's very, very popular to be doing those types of resumes nowadays.
Yeah.
And then, like, as far as portfolios, yeah, definitely, like, not having one, or I think a big thing that people do too is kind of provide too much information. So, like, have too much text that it's not very easily scannable. You don't necessarily know who the person is. Like, what's your story? What's your skills? What is your things that you're bringing to the table to a job versus just what your case studies are, just what your work is. Like, having that kind of personal connection and just you talking about how like why are you passionate about conversation design? What types of teams do you like working with? What types of experiences do you like working on? What platforms have you worked on? Like there's a lot of info that is just about you, and this is your portfolio and it should be about you. So having
Yeah.
that is very important, and I don't see it on a lot of people's sites. And then I just see generally like the case studies are just a lot to get through, and I know that it is a lot of information to explain, but how can you kind of simplify all of that, that if a person had a couple minutes to scan through it, like, are they gonna see what they need to see, and are they going to retain what they need to retain, especially if you have, like, a video demo that you've created, which if you haven't created one, you should create one, that's a great thing to do. Put it at the top. Don't put it at the bottom. Put
Nice.
that at the top so that people can just like, if all they see is that, like that's important. If all they see is what tools you used to create this, what was the problem, what was this resolution, like that is what you need, that like title, nice little summary. They can go into more if they want to, but they shouldn't have to in order to understand what the project is about.
It's kind of like what you do at work. If you like, it's just like you wouldn't want to overload a user with information in one of your designs, portfolio, resume, all of that. Same thing. Like it's
Yeah.
all communication.
Yeah.
Um, and I love that. You kind of mentioned earlier that some people might be coming from other fields or just not have direct conversation design experience. So we're thinking about people who are writers or just more general UX, maybe even linguistics majors. So for those people, is there a way that they can like position their experience to get a conversation design job?
Yes. Well, especially the backgrounds that you mentioned, like we still are at the point in conversation design roles where like those are the skills and experiences that people are looking for, even more
Mhm.
so than conversation design experience. Like I think that UX content, like linguistics, anything technical, like people are looking for those skills. And so doing your research of like looking over the job postings, if they're calling out skills that you have through that type of background, like making sure that those match up with what your resume is. And that goes for anyone too. If you're applying for a job that you are so excited about, take the extra time to tailor your resume to make sure that those bullets that they are looking for, if you have them, are in your resume, and make sure those skills are there. And I
Yeah,
think that like this could also work well for people like an exercise, for people who have like a customer service background, have worked in restaurants, have worked in like customer support, have done any type of phone job or anything like that.
for sure.
Just like make a little Venn diagram for yourself with like the skills of conversation designers, the skills of this type of background, and you will see how many things actually cross over. And you will also learn, I think, especially people that have like a customer service, customer support type of background. Those are experiences that need to be built all the time, and no one is a better expert at it than these people. And so, just like giving yourself more credit for the skills that you have, that you can do those things. This is just a different way of doing it.
Yeah, and there's just different ways to pitch yourself, right? Like my degree is also not in human computer interactions. Like I have an accounting degree. But what that does give me is a good understanding of the business. So something that I pitch about myself is like I am really good at stakeholder management with the business leaders involved in the project. And the other conversational design stuff, but like here's one reason why I am different or why you would want to pick me. And it's because the experience isn't this like picture perfect thing that you might expect. And I love that you said customer service reps. I think the best designers in the world are the people who are having these conversations that you're trying to replicate with AI every day. If they're very good at that, they're going to be able to ideate on what makes a good conversation for the bot too. So, if someone's looking to get out of the service industry and into more tech, I think you'd be very good at it.
Yeah. Broaden your horizons and like look at really what your skills are. And I guarantee that there will be different types of companies, different types of jobs out there for you. And as we know, like conversation design is are skills that can be learned. And so it's something that like you can learn on the job, you can learn through a course. Like there's so many ways that you can learn the skills that you don't yet have before or after you started a job.
Yep. I'm Yeah, I was working just general UX before I took some CDI courses and here we are. So,
Yeah.
it's like you said, it's learnable. Now
Mhm.
you have a very specific like, you're on the next level to me when it comes to conversation design because 'cause you're a public persona in it. People know about you, and I think that some people are trying to build their own brands a little bit more, so talking more about, like, LinkedIn and your online presence. So where should someone start if they want to go down that path, but they're not naturally online?
Yeah. One of the first things that I like to clarify to people, I think because like if you're a conversation designer, you want to be a conversation designer, you're curious about putting yourself online, you like find my LinkedIn, like don't compare yourself to me because what a lot of people forget is like this marketing and branding and social media, like this is my job and this has been my job for like 15 years. So, like, I've
Yeah.
been creating content online since, like, 2008. Like, I know how to do it. I do it for work. I've done it for work for, like, a decade, and it comes very natural to me, and it's something that I enjoy a lot, and it's something
Mhm.
that I just, like, want to do. So, like, I think that if you think of, like, that saying of, like, don't compare your day 1 to, like, someone else's day 100, like, don't compare
Yeah.
your day 1 to, like, my year 15, you know what I mean? So,
Or
there's,
you'll
like,
just be
that, and I
sad.
think yeah, yeah, or you just will think that, like, "Oh, it's, like, pointless," or, like, "I have so much work to do to, like, get to where I, like, have my own website, my own brand, like, I have, followers," whatever your goal is of doing something like this, and that doesn't just go for me, it goes for a lot of people who create content, on LinkedIn or share things, like, a lot of people just have that interest and they have the experience.
Yep.
But my situation specifically, like I'm always like, hey, I just want people to know that like I do this day on my for my day job. So like it definitely is, I post on LinkedIn for like our CEO for my day job. So that's like starting point. But similar to a portfolio that it's just like having it, and I think for LinkedIn especially, like, having your profile fully filled out, having it be publicly available that people can, like, see your profile, connect with you, that's, like, the bare minimum, I would say, and then, like, just starting to connect with people, like, there are so many ways that you can be active online without creating content that you can kind of like build a network that is going to help you get jobs, is going to help you learn, it's going to help you know people without creating content. But if you want to create content, there also are ways that you can do it without kind of like overwhelming or overloading yourself that will allow you to
For
like
sure.
test the waters. So like one, like, very easy thing to do is, like, attend events, like, watch videos, take courses, and when you do that, post about it. "Hey, I just, listened to Unprompted with Hillary and Rachel, and, like, here's one thing that I saw about it. Here's the link." Yeah, exactly. So that's something that, like, is very easy to do because you were there, you were watching it, you had thoughts while you were doing it. So it's very easy to, like, share in that way. It's
Mhm.
also very easy to leave comments on other people's posts, like other people's pages, as a way to just like start kind of like communication, start getting to know the community. And like the conversation design community is so incredibly welcoming. Like,
Yes.
start adding other people on LinkedIn and just like message them and say, hey, I liked this content, or like, hey, I'm going to this event. Have you heard about it? Hey, we just met at this event. Like, great to meet you. Let's like stay in touch. There's so many different ways to kind of like just put your feelers out there, I guess. And then like if you read anything or anything like that that you're consuming that other people made, you can share about that, or you can share anything obviously about what you're doing at work if you can share it, but also just what you're learning in your free time. Like there's so many different ways to like just start posting, and
Yeah.
that's really how you do it. Like, it's just, you start posting and maybe you make a goal for yourself that you're like, "I wanna post once a week, and I wanna add 5 people every single week," and that can be just, a slow way that you're kind of getting used to it, but I think, like, the main thing is just start talking to people. Like, just start getting used to, like, leaving comments, adding people, like, doing things like that just to, like, make yourself comfortable with being online, and then someday you can be as online as me.
Yeah, and be getting thousands of notifications and DMs and, yeah, it
Yeah.
it sounds like a lot of consistent small things. It's not like, "Oh, you're gonna come up with the most wonderful, perfect post, and everyone's gonna see it, and, you're gonna get thousands of likes immediately." Like, no, it's just building up little bits over time. And so, like, there's a spectrum of being very visible online and very popular, and then just not being online, and it's hard to get a job if you're on that side of the spectrum. Is there, like, a minimum effort you'd recommend for someone to be visible enough to be either a content creator or, like, noticed by recruiters? Like, how active does the average person have to be?
Yeah. putting your time in to like engage and do that. And like the comments also do show up on your own LinkedIn. So that's another thing too, is like if you're on there kind of like touching all of these different aspects and then you want to create a post, that will show up as well on there. So I think that people who will like have aspirations to use content to like attract jobs to them, I would definitely try to post like once every other week maybe, and like just see if you can kind of like build that cadence. Like I don't post every week. I don't post every day. I don't post every week. Like it still kind of will last longer. And I do think things on LinkedIn last for like a month before kind of people don't see them anymore because of the way the feeds are arranged.
Yeah.
But definitely like just having that sort of like activity is going to help when people are hiring. They might be tagging you in a post, or, they might think of you. Like I tag people all the time when I see jobs posted like in their city. And a lot of times it's people I don't even know. It's people that I kind of have met on LinkedIn that are telling me, "Hey, I'm looking for a job. If you ever hear of anything, let
And
me
they're
know." And
top
I'm
of
like, "Here."
mind. Yeah, you're like, well,
Yeah.
this person, Blake, they seem good.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, or like, I've talked with them in like private messages. And so it's not just about being active on LinkedIn, posting a bunch of times. Like a lot of things are just more done through networking and through just kind of like being active within the community, attending these events, putting the word out there about yourself, and like maintaining these relationships and these, growing your professional network. And that could also be like if you're not an online person, there's in-person meetups. You can meet in person with people who are in the industry, or you can go to conferences, or there's a lot of ways that you can find your right thing that just will feel natural to you and will be like not scary, so that you can accomplish your real goal of finding a job.
And last question, kind of in this area, then, because networking we know is great, referrals, amazing. What about those that, are trying their best in those areas, but they're at the point where they're just like cold applying? They are just applying to the different jobs they see, maybe hopefully on conversation designer jobs. Like that's a great place to apply, but like they're just sending their resume. Sometimes it feels like into the void. Any specific advice for those people?
Yeah, I mean, it is scary to be sending your resume into the void. And I will say, like, as someone who hired not a conversation designer, but someone on my team recently in content, is just like, I work at a very small company and we were hiring for an in office job, and I still got hundreds of people applying. And like,
Yeah.
I want to go through all of the applications. And so I did go through all the applications, tell people like yes or no, because that's important to me, but it's not important to everyone. And so I think that that is like, if you can find other ways aside from just doing easy apply and like forgetting about it, like spending the extra time, especially as I mentioned, for like jobs you love. So instead of saying like, I have a goal, I'm going to apply to 100 jobs today, like say I'm going to apply to 10 jobs today, but I'm going to like do extra stuff just to see if that works. I'm going to go to the company's website and see if they have the job posted there, and if there's a different way I can apply that isn't just this huge LinkedIn inbox. Because LinkedIn
Yeah.
definitely is the way where like, I had posted my job on LinkedIn, on our website that said for people to email me, and then on Indeed.
It's exhausting, yeah. But if you're doing 100 per day, which is like cripplingly exhausting, like are you going to have the energy to then do some of the if you do get an interview, sometimes the amount of pre-work you have to do for the interview and all that kind of stuff, like that takes time too. So you might as well be legitimately interested in what you're applying for and save some of that energy for like your shot, right? So we hope that helps. And to hopefully, so to bring it a little more full circle and going broad again with conversation design, just a few more questions about like with all the changes that have happened, what conversation design skills still matter? I think there are a lot, but like more, what ones do you think are becoming obsolete?
I think they all still matter. I mean, I definitely think there still is a place for a lot of things, and I think, like, the fundamentals of conversation design and user experience, like, have not changed. I do think that, like, if people are, learning from scratch, like, we know that writing a, end-to-end script fully fleshed out, like every single piece of content written by you and put in order and having the flow chart be most optimized and organized, like that is not as relevant anymore. I'm sure there still are many brands who are using that type of flow, but like eventually it is not going to be as important. So I would not focus as much on perfecting that. And I think that that probably can also be said about a lot of like tools. And so,
Mhm.
spending time learning how to use every single tool, learning how to prototype perfectly and like do all of these things, like becoming an expert in 10 different design tools. Like, I don't think that that is as needed now. I think that, as I had mentioned earlier, like a lot of companies are making their own proprietary tools because they're trying to figure out how they can, best manage all of their information themselves. So I think a
Yeah.
lot of that is going to be, learn one or two tools and like have a way that you can get started, but also be prepared that like you're going to need to be learning that with whatever the team is using when you get to the job that you're going to be working at. So I think that that like is where people used to spend a lot of time of like, I need to learn dialogue flow and I need to learn Raza and I need to learn voice flow and I need to learn bot mock and like all these things where I think now it's
Yeah.
like I said, like pick what works best for your brain and kind of like use that and have your personal like toolbox that you're going to use if you want to go create something from scratch today. But don't feel like you have to like learn how to use every single thing out there. So I think that that is like, it's not obsolete to like use tools, but I think it is to like be, an all in one toolbox type of talent. You know what I mean? So I think that that is something that we're kind of just seeing. And then obviously, like NLP, I think is another thing that we're kind of seeing is kind of still relevant, but not as relevant as it was to be a skill that you knew before. And I feel like before it was kind of like people who knew that skill were like a special type of conversation designer. Like it was like you're like, wow, you really like your brain works in a different way than mine and you like truly understand this. And I think for a lot of things, it's like having the understanding of how bots are built and having an understanding of like what's technically possible and like why certain things might not be possible are helpful. But like understanding how to do all of that like isn't something that is going to be a requirement long term.
Yeah, like the ability to learn quickly is more important than any accumulated knowledge that you have because you can learn any tool on YouTube and through
Yeah.
documentation like pretty fast nowadays. So, yeah, I agree like trying to make sure you have experience in literally everything is just it's not a good use of time.
We get to do more of the fun stuff, but both parties like and that's the same thing too, like AI can write code, but like would you trust it to
Right.
make like an assistant for your entire business? Like I would hope not. So I
Some
think that
people say
there's
yes. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, you could, but, like, it's that's less of a question of something that people would do as opposed to, like, would you or would you not have a designer? And so I
Mhm.
think that that should just kind of tell us that, like, if you wouldn't do one, you probably shouldn't do the other one.
Right, like, you still need someone there who knows whether what AI did is good or not, and what
Yeah.
standards we should hold it to, and they should still be very high.
Right, and if
So,
it didn't do something that we expected or if it did something wrong, like, now what? You know?
they're like, "Well, it worked in testing, so that's not
Yeah,
our
or it
problem."
did its job or what like, if it does its job every single time, but, like, no people are getting to the end, like, that's not really a good job.
Exactly. Is there something in this space that you're currently curious about but haven't, like, figured out yet?
Um, definitely of as far as, like, the tooling aspect goes, like, definitely just thinking about my unknowns of, like, how versioning, I think that that's like an easy thing to solve, but like if you do testing, like how does it work if you have a bunch of different versions that aren't necessarily like things are written slightly differently every single time? Like, how do you manage that? How do you decide when something is successful and to take, to the next step and like go up to the next level of AI? And then additionally, it's a whole new way of operating and it's a whole new way of learning. And it is something that we don't necessarily have the types of resources that we had then, or people aren't creating resources the same as they were creating them before because a lot of people are keeping this information more close to their companies, which I totally understand. It's your work and your way, and a lot of
Yep.
times it's the only way that your company is doing it, and it can't be applied to other companies too. So it is very different as like more and more organizations are involved in this industry. There's so many different ways of doing things, and that is definitely hard.
There's just so much to, like, keep track of and think of as a designer nowadays with everything you've just listed. And so if someone were to say, like, where do I even like, what should I focus on the most? If you had to pick one thing, either like a skill or a mindset thing about a potential conversation designer, let's say you're hiring somebody, what's like the thing that you would want to see most out of somebody?
I think the flexibility. I think flexibility is like the number one skill that a person can have in any job, but especially in conversation design is just like in the way that we are now, like our experiences are more flexible. And so we need to be more flexible and we kind of need to figure out like how can we, it's almost like our experiences now are becoming like our children, that it's like, how can we allow you to like operate and I can be like silently making sure that nothing is going wrong back here, but I'm not
Yeah.
controlling you. Like it is kind of that way where we're like, how can we kind of like put everything we can into something and then take a step back from it.
I love that. It's you wanna be invested in the outcome, but to find someone that's emotionally distant enough to be fearless and not to have too much pride in it that it, like, holds them back from testing or being proven wrong. So that's such a balance to be able to step away from it and say it's just a product at the end of the day, while also giving your best effort to it and wanting it to succeed. I love that. So I have one last question for you, and it's looking ahead about, let's say, 6 months from now. What do you think, as Hillary Black, your main focus or challenge is going to be at a strategic level?
6 months from now, but I definitely have on my mind of just like what happens then. What happens then when you hang up the phone and then you're on to do the next part of your policy? Like, what happens then when you get your code and then you're, wondering, you have a different question about a different thing? Like, how are we supporting people beyond just like one sole purpose? I think is something that I am very curious about.
Beautiful and fascinating. And I too am curious about that. Amazing. Hillary, thank you so much for spending this time with us and answering all of these questions. I think that everyone can learn a lot from you, not just from this, but everything you've done for the conversation design community. So, from everybody out there, thank you for everything you've done. And thank you, everybody watching and listening. This has been Unprompted by CDI, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Hillary.
Thank you.